The Talanoa Dialogue ended today. There are now calls to translate the storytelling into climate action and to move the dialogue into a political phase at COP24.
There's a number of issues that people are focusing on for this COP. Mitigation ambition at the end of the day is obviously the name of the game. I mean, we have to increase the effort over time. That's all built into the Paris Agreement. Part of what's happening this year is the implementing guidelines across a broad range of issues that are meant, in essence, to take the Paris Agreement from an agreement on paper to turn it into a living regime, a living, working, operational regime.
Nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are how countries are detailing actions aimed at keeping global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. At the same time, countries should strive to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees.
One thing we saw over the past 2 weeks is countries talking about what the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, should look like going forward. So countries have already submitted some of these plans in the run-up to the Paris COP in 2015. There's now a second round of NDCs coming, and there will be consecutive rounds after that. There's this push to provide better guidance in terms of what those plans should look like.
The UN scientific body on climate change, the IPCC, will publish a special report in October on the impacts of global warming of 1.5 degrees. In terms of context, one of the aims of the report is to strengthen the global response to climate change threats.
One of the things that we don't want to see is a reliance on what we call false solutions, or technologies that don't really exist, that we'd be relying on to remove emissions from the atmosphere later. One of the false solutions we'd say is bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, which is called BECCS for short. This is essentially taking often woody biomass, burning it for energy, and then capturing the emissions and storing it underground. It doesn't exist yet, and yet it's relied on heavily in a lot of emission pathways to remove emissions from the atmosphere later in the century. We're concerned because the amount of biomass that you'd need, the number of trees that you'd need essentially, would be huge. And that means millions of hectares of land would be required to grow that biomass. And that puts communities at risks of land grabs and hunger.
Bringing the discussion back to Talanoa, attention has shifted to what this dialogue can bring to the table in terms of reducing emissions.
I think we heard quite a strong call from many different actors about the need to enhance NDCs. So the question is now, how do we kind of take that energy that came from the Talanoa Dialogue, put that back into the negotiations on the rule book, but also equally take that ambition and spread it more widely back into countries at the national level to ensure that ambition is enhanced.
Please stay tuned for our wrap-up video on Friday. We'll be assessing progress here in Bonn and looking ahead towards COP24.